I want to take her to my bed, says the mafia boss in German. Then the new maid replies with something that leaves him pale. Hit subscribe and drop a like if your heart is ready for danger, chaos, and forbidden fire. The crystal chandelier cast fractured light across the marble floor as Robert Harris descended the grand staircase of his Manhattan estate. At 27, he ruled New York's underground with the precision of a surgeon and the ruthlessness of a predator. Men twice his age stepped aside when he entered a room. Entire families had learned not to speak his name above a whisper. But on this particular Tuesday morning, Robert Harris, the man who controlled half the city's illicit operations, was about to meet someone who would make him question everything he thought he knew about power. The new maid stood in the foyer, her head slightly bowed, hands clasped in front of her simple black uniform. Ashley Robinson, 25 years old according to her file, unremarkable background, no living family, perfect for someone who needed to disappear into the woodwork of his household staff. Robert barely glanced at her as he adjusted his cufflinks. His mind was already on the morning's business, a shipment coming through the harbor, a rival family making noise about territory disputes, the usual complications of running an empire built on fear and loyalty. He turned to his head of security, Klaus Müller, a German ex-military man who'd served the Harris family for 15 years. In rapid German, Robert spoke casually, arrogantly. Sie ist hübsch. Ich würde sie gerne in mein Bett bekommen. The crude remark, I'd like to get her into my bed, rolled off his tongue without thought. He'd grown accustomed to speaking freely in German around the household staff, none of whom understood the language. The silence that followed made his spine stiffen. Treffen Sie mich in 5 Minuten oben. The voice was soft, feminine, and spoke perfect German. Meet me upstairs in 5 minutes. Robert's head snapped toward the maid. Ashley Robinson stood exactly as before, her posture unchanged, but her eyes, those clear blue eyes he hadn't really noticed until this moment, held his with an intensity that sent ice through his veins. Klaus cleared his throat uncomfortably. The other staff members who'd been arranging breakfast suddenly found reasons to be elsewhere. Robert felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Genuine uncertainty. Who the hell was this woman? And now, if you're enjoying this story of forbidden attraction and dangerous secrets, make sure you're subscribed because things are about to get explosive. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens when Robert discovers who Ashley really is. Robert Harris didn't move for a full 10 seconds. The grandfather clock in the corner ticked away the silence as Ashley Robinson turned on her heel and walked toward the service stairs with the confidence of someone who had nothing to fear. Or everything to hide. Klaus shifted his weight, his hand instinctively moving toward the weapon concealed beneath his jacket. Boss? Leave it. Robert's voice came out rougher than intended. His mind raced through possibilities, each more troubling than the last. A spy from a rival family? An undercover federal agent? Someone with a death wish? The rational part of his brain, the part that had kept him alive and in power for the past 7 years, screamed at him to have Klaus drag her to the basement interrogation room. To find out exactly who she was and who'd sent her before she could become a problem. Instead, Robert found himself climbing the main staircase, his Italian leather shoes silent against the Persian runner. The mansion had 42 rooms, but he knew exactly where she'd be waiting. The East Wing study, private, soundproof. The room where he conducted business he didn't want overheard. She stood by the window, backlit by the morning sun streaming through the floor-to-ceiling glass. Her maid's uniform looked different now, or perhaps he was seeing it differently. The way it fit her frame suggested someone who moved with purpose, not subservience. Her light brown hair, pulled back in a simple bun, revealed a graceful neck and the kind of composed features that could blend into any crowd. "Close the door," she said in English this time, her accent American with the faintest European undertone he hadn't noticed during her brief interview 3 days ago. Robert did, then crossed his arms and leaned against the heavy oak. "You have 60 seconds to explain who you are before this conversation becomes extremely unpleasant." My name is Ashley Robinson. I'm 25. I grew up in foster care in Philadelphia. No criminal record, no outstanding debts, no family to miss me if I disappeared. She recited the facts from her employment file with detached precision. All of that is true, except the part where a foster kid from Philadelphia speaks fluent German. Robert kept his voice level, but his right hand had moved closer to the weapon at his hip. That's not something you pick up from Duolingo. For the first time, something flickered across her face. Not fear. Something closer to resignation. My mother was German. She taught me before she died when I was 8. The foster system doesn't keep detailed records of deceased parents' linguistic abilities. It was plausible. Robert's instincts, honed by years of reading people for lies, told him she was telling the truth, or at least a version of it. That doesn't explain why you're working in my house. He pushed off from the door, closing the distance between them. Or why you'd risk revealing yourself over a crude comment. Ashley turned to face him fully. Up close, Robert could see the slight pulse at her throat, the only sign that she wasn't as calm as she appeared. I needed a job. Your household pays well and doesn't ask too many questions. As for the risk, she met his eyes. Men like you make comments like that because you think you're invisible, untouchable. I wanted you to know that someone sees you clearly. The audacity of it struck him like a physical blow. Robert Harris, who commanded respect through fear, who made grown men stammer with a single look, had just been called out by a woman who cleaned his floors. He should be furious. He should be calculating exactly how to dispose of this problem. Instead, he found himself studying the way light caught in her hair, the determined set of her jaw, the intelligence burning behind those blue eyes that had gone from unremarkable to unforgettable in the span of 3 sentences. You have no idea how dangerous this is, he said quietly. What you just did. I have some idea. Her voice was steady. I've worked for dangerous men before. That admission hung in the air between them. Robert's mind catalogued the implications. She wasn't naive. She'd chosen this position knowing what he was, which meant she either had a death wish or an agenda. Why would you admit that? He asked. Because pretending to be something I'm not is exhausting. Ashley moved away from the window, creating distance. And because I think you're about to run a comprehensive background check that would reveal it anyway. Better to control the narrative. She was right. Klaus was probably already pulling every piece of digital information about Ashley Robinson that existed. By tonight, Robert would know what she'd eaten for breakfast on her 16th birthday. What do you want? The question came out sharper than intended. To keep my job. Simple, direct. I'm good at it. I stay out of your business. I don't ask questions. I just want to work and be left alone. Robert laughed, the sound harsh in the quiet room. You think you can work in my house, speak my private language, challenge me in my own study, and be left alone? I think, Ashley said carefully, that you're intrigued enough to let me try. The presumption should have offended him. Instead, Robert felt something he hadn't experienced in years, genuine curiosity. This woman, with her quiet defiance and dangerous honesty, was either the biggest threat to his operation or the most fascinating person to walk into his life in a decade. Here's how this works, he said, his voice dropping into the tone he used when making deals that couldn't be broken. You stay, you work, but you report directly to me now, not the head of household staff. Every morning at 7, you bring coffee to my office. If I have questions, you answer them, truthfully. And if I refuse? Then Klaus escorts you out, and we both know you'll never make it to the end of the driveway. Robert let the threat hang unspoken, not because he'd actually harm her. Despite his reputation, he had lines he didn't cross, but because she needed to understand the gravity of her situation. Ashley's expression didn't change. Sounds like a promotion. It's a leash, Robert corrected. The question is whether you're smart enough to wear it. She considered this for a long moment. Outside, New York hummed with its usual chaos. Traffic, voices, the distant wail of sirens. Inside this soundproof room, two people who should never have met stood measuring each other's worth. "Coffee at 7, Ashley finally said. "Black, no sugar. You take it in a ceramic cup, never paper. You read the Wall Street Journal first, then the Times. You don't like to be interrupted before you've finished both." Robert's eyebrow raised. "You've been watching me." "I've been doing my job. Good staff are invisible, but that doesn't mean they're blind." She moved toward the door, pausing with her hand on the brass knob. "Anything else, Mr. Harris?" The formality stung after the intimacy of the conversation. "One more thing. Whatever you think you know about me, whatever you've heard, it's probably worse. If you're smart, you'll remember that." Ashley looked back at him, and for just a second, her professional mask slipped. What he saw beneath it made his breath catch. Not fear, but a bone-deep weariness that spoke of survival, of battles fought in silence. "I don't scare easily," she said softly. "I stopped being afraid of monsters a long time ago." Then she was gone, the door clicking shut behind her, leaving Robert alone with the uncomfortable realization that the most dangerous thing in his mansion wasn't the weapons cache in the basement or the classified information in his safe. It was a 25-year-old woman with secrets in her eyes and perfect German on her tongue. Klaus was waiting in the hallway when Robert emerged. "I've initiated the deep background check. We'll have everything by tonight. I want surveillance on her too. Where she goes, who she contacts, every keystroke on her phone." "Already done." Klaus hesitated. "Boss, this is unusual. We should nothing," Robert cut him off. "She stays. Under watch, but she stays." Klaus's expression suggested he thought Robert was making a mistake, but he was too loyal to say it out loud. "Understood." Robert descended the stairs, his mind churning. The morning's business still demanded his attention: the shipment, the territory dispute, the endless machinery of his empire. But underneath it all ran a new current of awareness. Ashley Robinson was hiding something. And Robert Harris, who'd built his power on uncovering secrets and exploiting weaknesses, was going to find out what, even if it meant getting close enough to burn. The surveillance footage revealed nothing and everything. For 3 weeks, Robert watched Ashley Robinson live the most mundane existence imaginable. She worked her shifts with quiet efficiency, returned to the small studio apartment she rented in Brooklyn, bought groceries at the corner bodega, and spent her evenings reading in the window of her third-floor walk-up. No suspicious phone calls, no secret meetings, no contact with anyone who raised flags in Klaus's comprehensive network of informants. "She's clean," Klaus reported, frustration evident in his clipped tone. "Too clean. Nobody's life is this boring." Robert studied the bank of monitors in his private office, watching Ashley arrange fresh flowers in the mansion's main hall. Even in the grainy black-and-white security feed, there was something compelling about the way she moved. Purposeful, contained, like she was constantly aware of taking up space in the world. "What about her past employers?" he asked. Klaus pulled up a file on the tablet he carried everywhere. 3 families over the past 4 years. All wealthy, all with complicated business arrangements. 2 moved to Europe abruptly. The 3rd died in what was ruled a boating accident. Robert's attention sharpened. Ruled? Insurance company paid out without investigation, but the boat had been recently serviced. No mechanical issues found. Names. Klaus rattled off the families. Robert recognized 2 of them, one with connections to the Russian syndicate, another who'd been laundering money for a Colombian cartel. The 3rd he didn't know, but a quick mental calculation placed them in the same social circles as his own operation. "She has a type," Robert said slowly. "She works for criminals. Or she's very unlucky in her employment choices." Klaus didn't sound convinced of his own suggestion. Robert wasn't convinced either. But after 3 weeks of surveillance revealing nothing, He was starting to wonder if Ashley's most dangerous quality was simply being exactly who she claimed to be, a survivor who'd learned to navigate the shadows because that's where people like her had to live. Every morning at 7, she brought coffee to his office. Black ceramic cup, temperature perfect. She'd set it on the corner of his desk, meet his eyes for exactly 2 seconds, and leave unless he indicated otherwise. It was driving him insane. On the 24th day, Robert broke the routine. "Stay," he said as she turned to leave. Ashley paused, her hand on the door. "You have a call with your accountant in 5 minutes." "I'll make him wait." Robert gestured to the leather chair across from his desk. "Sit." She did, settling into the chair with the same controlled grace she brought to everything. This close, Robert could see details the cameras missed. The slight calluses on her fingers from work, the faint scar along her left temple that disappeared into her hairline, the way her eyes tracked his movements with the awareness of someone who'd learned to anticipate danger. 3 weeks, he said. "You've been perfect. Too perfect." "Is that a complaint?" "It's an observation. People aren't perfect. They make mistakes, have bad days, forget things. You haven't forgotten a single detail in 24 days. Ashley's expression didn't change. "Would you prefer I make mistakes? I can start overcooking your eggs if that would make you more comfortable." Despite himself, Robert felt his mouth twitch toward a smile. "I'd prefer you be human." "I am human. I'm just very good at my job. That's what worries me." Robert leaned back in his chair, studying her. "I've had Klaus dig into every aspect of your life. You know what he found? Nothing. And in my world, nothing is more suspicious than something. Or maybe I'm just boring." Ashley's voice remained level, but Robert caught a flicker of something in her eyes. Defensiveness? Fatigue? Nobody who speaks 4 languages is boring. That made her blink. 4? German, English, Russian, and Spanish. You murmured in Russian while arranging flowers last Tuesday. Yesterday you hummed a Spanish lullaby while cleaning the library. Robert watched her process the fact that he'd been paying that much attention. "So which orphanage teaches multilingual foster children?" Ashley was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice carried a weight that hadn't been there before. "The kind where you learn to survive by making yourself useful. I had a gift for languages. It opened doors, kept me fed, gave me value when I had nothing else to offer." The honesty in her admission caught Robert off guard. This wasn't the composed, professional mask she usually wore. This was real. "And now?" he asked quietly. "Now I use those skills to make coffee and arrange flowers for a man who could have me killed on a whim." Her lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Ironic, isn't it? I don't kill people on whims. No, you're much more deliberate than that." Ashley held his gaze. "I've worked in enough houses like this to know the difference between chaos and control. You're the latter." Robert should have been alarmed that she'd categorized him so accurately. Instead, he found himself leaning forward, drawn by the challenge in her eyes. "What else do you think you know about me? I know you're left-handed but trained yourself to shoot with your right. I know you sleep less than 5 hours a night and have nightmares you pretend not to remember. I know you speak to your mother's photograph when you think no one's listening, and that you still wear your father's watch even though it stopped working 2 years ago." Ashley's voice softened. "I know you're more than the title people whisper. And I know that loneliness, when you're the most powerful person in the room, is its own kind of prison." The silence that followed was deafening. Robert felt stripped bare by her observations, exposed in a way that no amount of surveillance or interrogation had ever achieved with him. "You shouldn't know those things," he said, his voice rough. "Invisible, remember? You stop seeing the help after a while. We become furniture, wallpaper. But furniture sees everything." Robert stood, needing to move, to break the intensity of the moment. He crossed to the window that overlooked the mansion's grounds, manicured lawns, wrought iron gates, armed security patrolling in rotation. A beautiful cage he'd built for himself. "My father started this empire," he said, surprising himself with the admission. "I was 17 when they killed him. Shot him in front of me at a restaurant downtown. The police ruled it gang violence, closed the case in 6 weeks." Behind him, he heard Ashley's sharp intake of breath. "I had a choice," Robert continued. "I could run, try to build a normal life, pretend I didn't know what I knew. Or I could take his place. Become the thing that killed him." He turned to face her. "I chose wrong." "Did you?" Ashley's question was soft but direct. "I'm 27 years old and I control territory worth hundreds of millions. I have power, respect, fear, and I'm more alone than I was at 17. Robert's laugh was bitter. "You tell me if that sounds like the right choice." Ashley stood, and for a moment, Robert thought she would leave, that he'd revealed too much, crossed a line from employer to something far more dangerous. Instead, she crossed the space between them, stopping just out of reach. "I lost my mother when I was 8. Car accident, my father. He couldn't handle it. Started drinking, stopped working. I came home from school one day and found him with a bottle of pills and an empty bottle of whiskey." Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled slightly. "The state put me in the system. 18 different homes in 10 years. Some good, most not." Robert's chest tightened. "Ashley, I learned early that the only person you can count on is yourself. That trust is a luxury you can't afford when survival is your only goal." She met his eyes. "But I also learned that sometimes the monsters we're afraid of are just people who are more scared than we are." The vulnerability in her admission made Robert want to reach for her, to close the distance, to prove that he was different from every person who'd failed her. But before he could move, his phone buzzed with an urgent message from Klaus. "Problem at the harbor. Feds are sniffing around the shipment. Need you now." Reality crashed back in with brutal efficiency. Robert was a crime lord with an empire to protect, not some lovesick fool who could afford emotional entanglements. "I have to go," he said, his voice returning to its usual professional distance. "Business." Ashley nodded, the walls coming back up in her expression. "Of course." As she turned to leave, Robert caught her wrist. The contact sent electricity through his hand, and from the way her breath hitched, she felt it too. "Tonight," he said. "Dinner. Here, 8 o'clock. Mr. Harris. Robert." His thumb brushed against her pulse point, feeling the rapid beat there. "When we're alone, it's Robert." Ashley searched his face for something. Doubt, perhaps, or signs of the predator she knew he could be. Whatever she found, it made her relax slightly. "Dinner at 8, Robert." She pulled her hand free gently. "I'll make something special." After she left, Robert stood in his office, staring at the spot where she'd been, trying to remember the last time someone had looked at him and seen a man instead of a monster. His phone buzzed again. Klaus, the harbor, the real world with its real consequences. But for the first time in 10 years, Robert Harris found himself wishing he could be someone else. The gunshots came at 3:47 a.m. Robert was already awake, going over shipping manifests in his study, when the first explosion of sound shattered the mansion's nighttime silence. Years of training kicked in instantly. He hit the floor, grabbed the weapon from the drawer beneath his desk, and was moving before his conscious mind fully processed the threat. Klaus's voice crackled through the security system. "North perimeter breach. 3 vehicles. Armed assault team. Get to the safe room now." But Robert was already calculating. The safe room was in the basement, accessed through the kitchen. If they'd breached the north perimeter, they'd be sweeping the house systematically, and the kitchen was on the main floor. Ashley. Her room was in the east wing, directly in the path of any assault team entering through the north. Robert made a decision that went against every tactical bone in his body. Instead of heading for safety, he ran toward danger. The East Wing hallway was dark except for emergency lighting that had kicked in automatically. Robert moved silently, weapon up, senses hyper-alert. The sounds of the assault were clearer here. Shouting, breaking glass, the methodical progression of professionals clearing rooms. Ashley's door was closed. Robert tried the handle, locked from the inside. Smart. "Ashley," he hissed, knocking rapidly. "It's Robert. We need to move now." The door opened so quickly she must have been pressed against it. She was dressed in dark clothes, jeans, black sweater, running shoes, and her hair was pulled back in a tight ponytail. But what made Robert's blood run cold was the tactical knife in her hand and the way she held it like someone who knew exactly how to use it. "How many?" she asked, her voice calm despite the chaos erupting around them. "At least a dozen. Professional." Robert grabbed her free hand. "Come on." They moved through the hallway, Robert leading, Ashley close behind. The sounds of the assault were getting closer, heavy boots on hardwood, barked commands in Russian. Russian. Robert's mind raced. The Kozlov family. It had to be. They'd been making noise about territory for months, but he'd never expected them to be bold enough to hit his home directly. They reached the servants' staircase, narrow, winding, designed for staff to move through the house unseen. Robert started down, pulling Ashley with him when voices erupted from below. Trapped. Robert's mind calculated options in nanoseconds. Up led to dead ends and certain confrontation. Down was already compromised. The only option was... "The library," Ashley whispered, reading his thoughts. "There's a secondary exit behind the bookcases on the east wall. It leads to the gardens." Robert stared at her. He'd never told anyone about that exit. It was a secret passage his father had built, known only to the family head and... "How do you know about that?" he demanded. "Does it matter right now?" Ashley was already moving, pulling him back up the stairs. She was right. Questions could come later. Survival was immediate. They burst into the library just as the sounds of the assault team reached the main hallway. Robert locked the heavy double doors, it would buy them maybe 2 minutes, and ran to the east wall bookcase. "Third shelf, fourth book from the left," Ashley said, already there, her hands moving with practiced efficiency. The bookcase swung open silently, revealing a narrow passage. Robert pushed Ashley through first, then followed, pulling the shelf closed behind them just as something heavy slammed against the library doors. The passage was pitch black and narrow, barely wide enough for one person. Robert felt Ashley's hand find his in the darkness, her fingers lacing through his with surprising strength. They moved by feel, the sounds of the assault muffled but still audible through the walls. Robert's mind was spinning. How did Ashley know about the passage? Had she been mapping the house's secrets all along? Was this entire thing a setup? But then they emerged into the garden shed, and Ashley was already scanning their surroundings with the tactical awareness of someone military trained, and Robert's paranoia warred with the undeniable fact that she'd just saved both their lives. "We need to move," Ashley said. "They'll have the perimeter covered." "There's a vehicle exit through the service gate," Robert replied. "If we can reach the garage, they'll expect that." Ashley was already moving, keeping low, using the garden's landscaping for cover. "We need to think like they don't expect us to think." Robert followed, his weapon raised, watching their six. "And how's that?" Like civilians." Ashley pulled him behind a stone fountain. "What's the most unlikely escape route?" Robert's brain, trained for tactical operations, stumbled over the question. Every escape route he'd planned was strategic, logical, the kind of thing a professional would consider. "The front gate," he said slowly. "Walk out the front gate like we're nobody." Ashley's smile was fierce and beautiful in the dim light of the garden lamps. "Exactly." They moved through the gardens with practiced silence, heading toward the front of the property instead of away from it. Robert could hear the assault team systematically clearing the mansion, expecting them to run, to hide, to behave like prey. Instead, they walked directly toward the main driveway. There were 2 guards at the front gate, not Robert's men, Kozlov's people, left to catch anyone trying to flee. They were focused inward, watching for movement from the mansion, not expecting anyone to approach from the gardens. Robert raised his weapon, calculating the shot, when Ashley grabbed his arm. "No," she whispered. "Gunfire will alert everyone." "Then how—" But Ashley was already moving, stepping out of cover with her hands raised, her entire demeanor changing. Gone was the tactical awareness, the quiet confidence. She stumbled forward, her face a mask of terror, her voice high and panicked. "Please, please, you have to help me. There's shooting inside, I'm just the maid. I don't know what's happening." The guards turned, weapons raised but not firing. A crying civilian was a complication, not a threat. "Stay where you are," one of them barked in heavily accented English. Ashley kept moving forward, sobbing, stumbling. "Please, I just want to go home. I don't want to die here." The guards exchanged glances. One lowered his weapon slightly, annoyed by the hysterical woman. That's when Ashley struck. Robert had seen professional fighters move, had trained with ex-military operators, but Ashley's movements were something else entirely. She closed the distance to the first guard in 2 strides, her hand finding a pressure point on his neck that dropped him silently before he could raise his weapon. The second guard started to turn, to shout, but Robert was already there, his pistol connecting with the man's temple with just enough force to render him unconscious without killing him. They stood over the unconscious guards, both breathing hard, and Robert realized with crystalline clarity that Ashley Robinson, whoever she really was not a maid. "We need to go," Ashley said, already dragging one guard into the bushes. "They'll do a radio check in minutes." Robert helped her hide the second guard. Then they slipped through the front gate into the New York night. The mansion blazed with lights behind them, the sounds of the assault still echoing. But they were out. They were alive. And Robert had approximately 1,000 questions burning in his mind. They ran 3 blocks before Ashley pulled him into an alley. She was breathing hard but controlled, her eyes scanning the street behind them. "There's a safe house in Brooklyn," Robert started to say, compromised. Ashley cut him off. "If they hit your home, they know about your bolt holes." "How do you—" "Because that's what I'd do." Ashley met his eyes, and in them Robert saw a truth he'd been avoiding. "We can't go anywhere connected to you. We need somewhere off the grid." "I don't have anywhere that's truly off the grid," Robert admitted. Ashley was quiet for a moment, making some internal calculation. Then she pulled out her phone, a device Robert realized he'd never seen her use, and made a call. "It's me," she said in rapid German. "I need a place. Tonight. Both of us." A pause. "Yes, I'm sure." Another pause. "Understood. 20 minutes. She hung up and looked at Robert. "I know a place. It's safe, but you're going to have to trust me." Robert studied this woman who'd gone from submissive maid to tactical operator in the span of an hour. Every instinct screamed that trusting her was insane. But his mansion was under assault, his security was compromised, and the only person who'd kept him alive tonight was standing in front of him with secrets in her eyes. "Lead the way," he said. They moved through the city like ghosts, using back streets and service alleys that only locals knew. Ashley's phone never came out again. She was navigating from memory, taking turns that seemed random, but Robert recognized as a pattern designed to lose any tail. 40 minutes later, longer than Ashley's promised 20, accounting for counter-surveillance, they arrived at a nondescript building in a part of Brooklyn Robert had never visited. Ashley led him up 4 flights of stairs to an apartment that smelled like old coffee and cigarette smoke. A woman answered the door, late 50s, sharp eyes, wearing a bathrobe and holding a very real-looking pistol. "Greta," Ashley said in German, "this is Robert. He needs shelter." Greta looked Robert up and down with the assessing gaze of someone who'd seen plenty of trouble. She said something in rapid German that Robert didn't catch, but Ashley's response made the woman's expression soften slightly. "Inside," Greta said in English, stepping aside. "But the gun stays with me." Robert hesitated only a second before handing over his weapon. Ashley did the same with her knife. Greta took both without comment and gestured them into the small apartment. "You sleep there," she pointed to a worn couch. "She comes with me. We talk in the morning." Then Greta led Ashley into the bedroom and closed the door, leaving Robert alone in a strange apartment in an unfamiliar neighborhood, his empire under assault, his life in the hands of a woman who'd just revealed she was nothing like what she'd claimed to be. Robert sank onto the couch, adrenaline finally crashing, and tried to process what had just happened. But all he could think about was the way Ashley had moved through that assault like she'd been trained for it. The way she'd known about secret passages in his house. The way she'd had a contact who could provide safe housing in the middle of the night. Ashley Robinson was not who she claimed to be, and Robert Harris, who'd built his empire on uncovering secrets, had just put his life in her hands. The question was whether that trust would save him or destroy him. Dawn broke over Brooklyn with harsh, unforgiving light. Robert woke on Greta's couch to the smell of strong coffee and the sound of rapid German conversation from the kitchen. His body ached from the previous night's escape, but his mind was already calculating, assessing threats, running through contingencies, trying to understand what the hell had happened to his carefully controlled world. The bedroom door opened. Ashley emerged dressed in borrowed clothes, worn jeans and a faded sweater that hung loose on her frame. Her hair was damp from a shower, and without the maid's uniform, she looked younger, more vulnerable. But her eyes held the same sharp awareness that had kept them alive last night. "You need to see this," she said, handing him a tablet. Robert took it, his stomach sinking as he scanned the news feeds. His mansion was all over the media, not the assault itself that had been contained, but the aftermath. 3 bodies found on the property. Police investigation. Kozlov family connections suspected. The entire operation exposed in a way that would take months to rebuild. "Klaus?" Robert asked, his voice tight. "Alive. In custody, but alive. He surrendered to the FBI before the Kozlovs could finish the job." Ashley's tone was carefully neutral. "He cut a deal. Immunity in exchange for testimony." Robert's world tilted. Klaus, his head of security, the man who'd served his family for 15 years, had betrayed him. "It gets worse," Ashley continued. "The assault wasn't just about territory. The Kozlovs were hired by someone inside your organization." "Who?" Ashley hesitated. And in that pause, Robert saw something that made his blood run cold. Pity. "Your uncle, Vincent Harris." The tablet slipped from Robert's fingers. Vincent, his father's brother, the man who'd taught him the business, who'd stood beside him at his father's funeral, who'd been his advisor for the past decade. "That's impossible," Robert said. But even as he spoke, pieces were clicking into place. Vincent's recent suggestions to expand into riskier territory, his insistence on bringing in new security personnel, his subtle undermining of Robert's authority in meetings. "I'm sorry," Ashley said quietly. "But there's proof. Financial transfers, communication logs. He's been planning this for at least 2 years." Robert stood, needing to move, to think. "How do you have this information?" "The FBI doesn't work this fast, and civilian intelligence doesn't—" He stopped, finally asking the question he should have asked hours ago. "Who are you? Really?" Ashley exchanged a look with Greta, who'd appeared in the kitchen doorway. The older woman nodded slightly, then retreated. "My name is Ashley Robinson. That part is true." She moved to the window, her silhouette backlit by the morning sun. "What I didn't tell you is that I work for a specialized organization. We gather intelligence on criminal operations, not for law enforcement. They're too slow, too corrupted, We work outside official channels. You're a spy. Robert's voice was flat. I'm a researcher. An analyst. I don't carry a badge, and I don't make arrests. I just find the truth. Ashley turned to face him. I was placed in your household 4 months ago to investigate your uncle. We'd been tracking him for years. Multiple criminal conspiracies, money laundering, connections to international trafficking. But he was careful, invisible, using your operation as cover. Robert felt like he'd been gutted. So everything, the job, the German, the conversation in my study, all of it was manipulation. No. Ashley's voice cracked slightly. The job was assignment. The German was real. But everything else, the conversations, the connection, that wasn't part of any plan. That was just us. There is no us, Robert said harshly. There's a crime lord and the spy who infiltrated his life. You're right. Ashley's composure finally broke. You're absolutely right. I should have told you sooner. I should have... She stopped, pressing her fingers against her eyes. But I couldn't. Because the moment I realized I was falling for you, I also realized that telling you would put you in more danger. Robert wanted to be angry. He wanted to rage at her deception, at the violation of trust, at the fundamental lie their entire relationship was built on. Instead, he heard himself ask, why? Because Vincent has people everywhere. In your security, in your organization, in law enforcement. If you'd known I was investigating him, you would have reacted, changed your behavior. He would have noticed and either killed you immediately or accelerated his timeline. Ashley's hands were shaking. The only way to keep you alive was to keep you in the dark. So you put yourself in danger instead. I'm trained for danger. Ashley's voice softened. You're a good man trapped in a bad legacy. You didn't choose this life. It was thrust on you when your father died. And every day since, you've been trying to find a way out while holding together an empire that's rotting from the inside. Robert stared at her. You don't know anything about me. I know you donate anonymously to 3 children's hospitals. I know you pulled funding from the trafficking operations the moment you took control. I know you've been quietly shifting legitimate business holdings so you could eventually walk away. Ashley moved closer. I know the man you are when you think no one's watching. And that's the man I fell in love with. The admission hung in the air between them, impossible and true. Robert's phone buzzed. A burner device Greta had provided. A message from a number he didn't recognize. Your uncle sends his regards. Your lawyer girlfriend won't save you this time. His blood froze. Sarah. Ashley grabbed his arm. Who's Sarah? My ex. We ended things 6 months ago, but we stayed friends. She's a corporate attorney, completely civilian, has nothing to do with... Robert was already pulling on his jacket. Vincent knows about her. If he's threatening her... It's a trap, Ashley said firmly. He's trying to draw you out. I don't care. Robert's voice was steel. I won't let him hurt someone because of me. Ashley studied his face for 3 seconds, then nodded. Okay, but we do this smart, and we do it together. You don't have to. I'm not asking permission. Ashley was already moving, grabbing gear from a closet Robert hadn't noticed. Greta, we need the car and the downtown safe house access codes. The older woman appeared with keys and a handwritten note. Be careful, Liebling. Vincent Harris is not a man who leaves loose ends. 20 minutes later, they were parked 3 blocks from Sarah's Upper East Side apartment. Robert's hands were tight on the steering wheel, every muscle coiled with tension. There, Ashley said, pointing to a black SUV with tinted windows. 3 men inside. Professional posture. They're watching her building. I can't just leave her in there. You won't. Ashley pulled out her phone, fingers flying across the screen. But we need to be smart. Give me 2 minutes. Robert watched as Ashley made 3 quick calls in 3 different languages. When she finished, She turned to him with something that might have been a smile. Sarah's about to get an urgent call from her firm requiring her immediate presence at their Midtown office. A car service will pick her up in 5 minutes. That service is actually run by people who owe Greta favors. They'll get her somewhere safe while we deal with Vincent's surveillance team. And then? Then we give Vincent what he wants. Ashley met his eyes. We let him think he's won. The plan was insane. It was also the only option they had. Robert watched as Sarah emerged from her building exactly 5 minutes later, got into the waiting car, and drove away. Vincent's team followed, just as Ashley had predicted. Now, Ashley said. They moved quickly, entering Sarah's building through the service entrance Ashley had somehow already mapped. The apartment was empty, but there was evidence of a hasty search. Drawers opened, papers scattered. They were looking for something, Robert said. Insurance, proof of your legitimate business holdings, anything they could use to force your hand. Ashley was photographing the scene with her phone. Vincent wants complete control, which means he needs you either dead or completely compromised. Robert's burner phone buzzed again. This time it was a call, unknown number. He answered. Vincent, nephew. His uncle's voice was warm, familiar, exactly the same as it had always been. I hear you had some trouble last night. Such a shame about the mansion. What do you want? Want? I want what I've always wanted. For the Harris family to reach its full potential. Your father was too cautious. You're too conflicted. But me? Vincent's voice hardened. I'm willing to do what's necessary. By hiring the Kozlovs to kill me? By removing an obstacle. Nothing personal, Robert. Just business. A pause. But I'm willing to make you a deal. Sign over control of the organization. Walk away. Live out your days as a civilian with that maid you've grown fond of. Everyone wins. Robert looked at Ashley, seeing his own understanding reflected in her eyes. Vincent would never let them walk away. This was a death sentence dressed as mercy. And if I refuse? Then I kill everyone you've ever cared about, starting with Sarah, then that German woman you're hiding with, then that fascinating analyst from the intelligence organization you've been sleeping with. Vincent's voice turned cold. Did you really think I didn't know, Robert? I've had eyes on you for months. The line went dead. Ashley's face had gone pale. He knows about the organization, about me, which means he has someone inside your operation too. Robert's mind was racing. We can't trust anyone. Not your contacts, not my people, not... Greta. Ashley was already dialing. Greta, get out now. Vincent knows about... She stopped, listening. Then her face crumpled. No, please. She dropped the phone. Robert caught her as her legs gave out. He got to her, Ashley whispered. Vincent's people. They're at her apartment. Her voice broke. She raised me. When my parents died and the system failed, she found me, trained me, gave me purpose. She's the only family I have. Robert held her, feeling the tremors running through her body, understanding with perfect clarity that Vincent had just escalated this from business to personal. Where would he take her? He asked quietly. Ashley pulled away, wiping her eyes, and when she looked up, Robert saw something that made him understand why Vincent should be afraid. The warehouse district. He owns a processing facility on the East River. It's where he conducts interrogations. Ashley's voice was steady now, cold with purpose. He'll take her there, to use as bait, to draw us in. It's a trap. I know. Ashley met his eyes. But I'm going anyway. Robert should have argued. Should have pointed out the tactical nightmare of walking into an obvious ambush. Should have done the smart thing and disappeared while they still could. Instead, he found himself saying, Then we go together. But we do it my way. Because somewhere in the past 4 months, Ashley Robinson had stopped being an assignment or a threat, or even just a woman he was falling for. She'd become the first person in 10 years who made him want to be more than the title people whispered. And Robert Harris might be a crime lord, might be trapped in a legacy of violence and fear. But he was also still the 17-year-old boy who'd watched his father die and vowed to protect the people he loved, even if it meant walking straight into hell. The warehouse sat dark and silent against the East River's oily black water. 3 a.m. The deadest hour of the night, when even the city that never sleeps caught its breath. Robert crouched beside Ashley on the roof of the adjacent building, both of them studying the target through night vision binoculars. The warehouse had 6 visible entry points, 2 loading docks, and at least a dozen armed guards patrolling the perimeter. "Thermal imaging shows 15 people inside," Ashley whispered, studying her phone's display. 3 on the ground floor, 12 in the sublevel. One of them isn't moving. That's probably Greta. Robert's jaw tightened. The smart play was to call in federal authorities, let them handle the assault. But Vincent had people in law enforcement. By the time backup arrived, Greta would be dead, and Vincent would disappear into the network of corruption he'd spent decades building. "The ventilation system," Robert said, pointing to a series of ducts on the warehouse roof. "My father used this facility years ago. I know the layout. There's a maintenance shaft that leads directly to the sublevel. That's how we get in." Ashley was already calculating. "But extraction?" "The river. There's a boat dock 50 yards east. We steal whatever's tied there." Ashley looked at him, and in the green glow of the night vision, Robert saw fear and determination warring in her expression. "This is insane. We're 2 people against 15 armed professionals." "I know." Robert reached out, his gloved hand finding hers. "We don't have to do this. We could disappear. New identities, new lives. Let Vincent win this round and—" "No." Ashley's voice was firm. "He killed my parents. I was 8 years old, and he made it look like an accident. I've spent 17 years gathering evidence, building a case, waiting for the right moment. I won't let him take Greta too." Robert's world tilted. "What?" "My father was Vincent's accountant. He found discrepancies, started asking questions. Vincent had them both killed and made sure I ended up in the system where I could be forgotten." Ashley's voice was steady, but her hand trembled in his. "Greta was my mother's friend. She found me, trained me, gave me the skills I needed to survive. And now I'm going to use those skills to end Vincent Harris once and for all." The revelation should have changed everything. She'd been hunting his uncle, and by extension, his family, for nearly 2 decades. Every moment between them had been built on a foundation of revenge and lies. But looking at her face, Robert saw the same thing he'd seen in his own mirror every morning for the past 10 years. Someone trapped by their past, trying desperately to build something better from the ashes of tragedy. "Then let's finish this," he said. They moved across the rooftop like shadows, years of different training achieving the same result. Silence, efficiency, purpose. The ventilation shaft was exactly where Robert remembered, rusted but functional. Ashley went first, her smaller frame navigating the tight space with practiced ease. Robert followed, every muscle remembering similar infiltrations from his early days learning the family business. The shaft opened into a storage room on the sublevel. Through the door, they could hear voices. Vincent's smooth baritone and another voice Robert didn't recognize. Ashley held up 3 fingers, then pointed to different locations. 3 guards outside, positioned strategically. They'd have to move simultaneously to avoid raising an alarm. Robert nodded, understanding. On Ashley's count, they moved. The guards went down silently, pressure points, chokeholds, techniques designed to incapacitate without killing. Robert had been taught these methods as a teenager, but had hoped never to use them. Ashley moved with the precision of someone who'd practiced 10,000 times. They dragged the unconscious guards into the storage room, then moved deeper into the sublevel. The main chamber opened before them, a vast space with concrete floors and industrial lighting. In the center, tied to a chair, was Greta. She was conscious but battered, blood trickling from a cut above her eye. And standing beside her, looking perfectly composed in an expensive suit, was Vincent Harris. "Right on time," Vincent said, his voice echoing in the empty space. "I was beginning to think you'd be smart for once, Robert." Robert stepped forward, weapon drawn. "Let her go." "Or what? You'll shoot me? Your own uncle?" Vincent's laugh was genuine. "You don't have it in you, nephew. You never did. That's why you could never truly lead this family. You killed my father." The words came out before Robert could stop them. "The restaurant shooting. That wasn't rival families. It was you." Vincent's smile widened. "Took you long enough to figure it out. Your father was weak, sentimental. He wanted to go legitimate, to build something better." The contempt in his voice was palpable. "He forgot what we are, what we've always been. I simply removed an obstacle." Ashley moved to Robert's left, her own weapon trained on Vincent. And her parents? Were they obstacles too? "Ah, the little Robinson girl, all grown up." Vincent's eyes gleamed. "Your father was too curious. Your mother tried to protect you. I would have let you live, you know. Child services would have destroyed you eventually. But then Greta had to interfere, had to train you, had to turn you into this." He gestured dismissively. "So now you're another obstacle." "You talk too much," Ashley said coldly. "You always have. That's what made building a case against you so easy. You can't resist bragging." Vincent's expression flickered. "What case? You're a civilian analyst with no law enforcement authority." "Was a civilian analyst." Ashley's smile was sharp. "As of 3 hours ago, I'm a federal witness under official protection. Everything I know about you, about your operation, about the murders and the trafficking and the corruption, it's all on record. Signed, sealed, and currently sitting in a federal prosecutor's safe." The color drained from Vincent's face. "You're lying." "Am I?" Ashley pulled out her phone with her free hand, screen showing a scanned document. "Seems Greta made some calls before you grabbed her. Got me immunity in exchange for testimony. Funny how things work out." Robert saw it happening in slow motion. Vincent's hand moving toward his jacket, the weapon concealed there. Robert's own gun was already up, his finger on the trigger, years of training overriding his hesitation. But Ashley was faster. She moved between Robert and Vincent, her weapon never wavering. "Don't," she said quietly. "Don't make him do this. Don't make him live with killing his own family." Vincent froze, hand still inches from his weapon. "You'd protect him? After everything the Harris family took from you?" "I'd protect the man he chose to become, despite what the Harris family made him." Ashley's voice was steady. "Robert isn't you, Vincent. He never was. And that's why he'll survive when you're rotting in a federal prison." The sound of sirens cut through the night. Distant but growing closer, Vincent's face twisted. "You called them." "The moment we entered the building," Robert said, his voice calm despite the adrenaline flooding his system. "Did you really think we'd walk into your trap without backup?" The warehouse erupted with activity, federal agents pouring through doors, tactical teams securing the perimeter, lights blazing to life. Vincent went for his weapon anyway, desperation overriding reason. Robert's gun was trained on his uncle's chest. One shot. That's all it would take. Justice for his father, for Ashley's parents, for every life Vincent had destroyed in his pursuit of power. But Ashley's hand touched his arm, gentle but firm. "Not like this," she whispered. "Not you. Let them take him." Robert met her eyes and saw faith in him, not in who he was, but in who he could be. The choice crystallized in that moment, simple and profound. He lowered his weapon. Federal agents swarmed Vincent, taking him down, securing him in handcuffs. The man who'd orchestrated murders and manipulated empires was reduced to shouting threats and curses as they dragged him away. Greta was freed, checked by paramedics, her sharp eyes taking in everything. She said something in German to Ashley that made the younger woman laugh through tears. And Robert stood in the center of the warehouse, the same warehouse where his father had conducted business, where he'd learned the family trade, where he'd been trained to become exactly what Vincent represented. But he wasn't that person. Not anymore. Special Agent Morrison approached, badge visible, expression professionally neutral. "Mr. Harris, we need your statement, and we need to discuss your cooperation with our investigation." "Am I under arrest?" Robert asked. "Not today. Ms. Robinson's testimony provides significant leverage, but we'll need corroboration. Your uncle's operation was extensive. We need to dismantle it completely." Morrison's expression softened slightly. "There's a deal on the table, immunity in exchange for full cooperation." Robert looked at Ashley, who nodded slightly. "What kind of cooperation?" "Everything. Financial records, personnel files, operational details. You help us roll up the entire network, and you walk away. Clean slate." Morrison extended a hand. "New life, Mr. Harris. Isn't that what you wanted?" It was exactly what Robert had wanted for 10 years. A way out. A chance to be someone other than his father's son, his uncle's puppet, the crime lord whose name made people whisper. He took Morrison's hand. "I'll give you everything." 6 months later, Robert Harris stood in a coffee shop in Portland, Oregon, watching rain streak down the window. The name on his driver's license was Michael Chen. The job on his resume was freelance business consultant. The past was sealed in federal testimony and classified documents. He was free. The bell above the door chimed. Robert turned and felt his heart stop the way it had every day for 6 months, because Ashley Robinson walked through that door looking exactly like herself. And somehow that was more beautiful than any disguise could be. She ordered her usual, black coffee, ceramic cup, no sugar, and joined him at the corner table. "How was your session?" She asked, referencing his weekly therapy appointments. Part of his immunity deal included mandatory counseling for PTSD. "Hard," Robert admitted. "We talked about my father today, about watching him die." Ashley's hand found his across the table. "Progress?" "Maybe." Robert turned his palm up, lacing their fingers together. "My therapist says I'm learning to separate the man from the legacy, to remember him as human, not just as the crime lord." "That's good." Ashley squeezed his hand. "Greta's doing better too. The physical therapy is working. Doctor says she'll have full mobility back in another month." They sat in comfortable silence, watching Portland's perpetual rain. Two people who'd been given the rarest of gifts, a second chance. "I got an offer," Ashley said eventually. "The organization wants me to consult on a case in Europe. 3 months, maybe 4. Robert's chest tightened. "That's great. You should take it." "I told them no." He looked up sharply. "Why?" "Because I spent 17 years hunting one man, and in the process, I forgot how to just live." Ashley's smile was soft. "I want to learn, with you, if you want that too." Robert thought about the mansion in Manhattan that had been seized by federal authorities, about the empire that had crumbled when Vincent's network was exposed, about the power and fear and control that had defined his entire adult life. Then he thought about coffee shop mornings and therapy sessions, and the woman across from him who'd seen him at his worst and still believed in his best. "I want that," he said. "More than I've ever wanted anything." Ashley leaned across the table and kissed him, soft, sweet, tasting like coffee and rain and new beginnings. When they pulled apart, Robert said, "I love you. I don't think I ever actually said it out loud." "You didn't have to. You showed me every time you chose to be different than what you were raised to be." Ashley's eyes shimmered. "But hearing it is nice too." They finished their coffee, made plans for dinner, argued playfully about whether to see a movie or stay in and read. Normal things, civilian things. the kind of mundane, beautiful existence that neither of them had ever thought they'd get to experience. As they walked out into the Portland rain, Ashley's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, smiled, and showed Robert the screen. It was a message from Greta. Vincent Harris sentenced to life without parole. Federal judge cited extraordinary cooperation from key witnesses. Justice, Liebling. Finally. Robert read it twice, waiting for the satisfaction, for the sense of victory. Instead, he felt only a quiet sense of closure. His uncle would spend the rest of his life in prison. His father's death was avenged. The cycle of violence was broken. And Robert Harris, or Michael Chen, or whoever he chose to be now, was standing in the rain with the woman he loved, both of them free from the past that had tried to define them. "What are you thinking?" Ashley asked. Robert pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her temple. "That we won." "We did, didn't we?" She looked up at him, and in her eyes, Robert saw their future, uncertain, imperfect, but entirely their own. "So what do we do now?" Robert thought about all the plans he'd made over the years, all the strategies and contingencies and careful calculations that had kept him alive in a world where trust was fatal and love was weakness. Then he threw them all away and answered with the truest thing he'd ever said. "Whatever we want." They walked into the rain together, two survivors who'd chosen love over revenge, freedom over power, and each other over everything else. And for the first time in his life, Robert Harris felt like he could finally breathe.